Hey everyone, just a quick intro. You're about to see a long video, if you choose to, and it's really meant as a time capsule, as a compilation for my life, for me to look back and be like, hey, this was the time I spent at Angry Mom Records. So it's a little bit of a selfish thing, but I do show a lot of records. I do tell a ton of stories, a lot of personal stories, a lot of fun things about the store. So it should be fun, but it is long. Again, it's meant to sort of encapsulate 10 years of my life, selfishly for me to look back on and say, wow, that was fun. So I hope you dig, hope you enjoy. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. I do want to make sure, because I only mentioned at the end of the video, that this coming Wednesday, if you're a local, you should come to Ithaca. Come to Angry Mom, and also come to this. It's a little mini record fair I'm throwing at the Downstairs Club in Ithaca, Wednesday, August 20th. It's a trade and sale, swap and shop. If you're a local somewhat or nearby, consider coming out. I will be there. I'm running it, so it should be fun. Get in touch if you're interested. All right, here it is.
I ran record stores in New York City for a long time in the 90s. Then I did a bunch of internet stuff and online sales. And the opportunity came up to take over this space. And I took it 10 years ago, and it's just been going ever since.
I helped George out with a multitude of things, whether it's helping order a new product, the marketing, the online stuff, and the sort of social media and all that stuff too. We do sell every format, essentially, CDs, a lot of tapes recently, we have 78s, 45s, and then, stereo equipment, everything you see here, basically. Plus, we have a separate online inventory that is not in the store. For this kind of thing, me personally, I have to look a lot of this up. I don't really know off the top of my head. I can usually tell something that's definitely has the chance of being something valuable, and I can usually tell if something's going to not be worth anything, but I usually look it up anyway just to make sure.
I have pickers all over the state for used stuff. People walk in. I do house calls. Lots of times it's people that died or divorced or just downsizing. There's another thing that happens a lot with like baby boomers.
We never go out looking for a specific record. It's always, what do you see, what do you get? Even when I'm looking for my own personal taste, it's kind of like see what turns up and dig through and see what's in there.
Travel somewhere down south. Hey!
Well, this is one I've been cooking up for a little while now. This is Seeking a Thread. My name is Dom. I've always mentioned it in the time of doing this channel, that Seeking a Thread, that I work at Angry Mom Records in Ithaca, New York. That's where I live. I haven't really mentioned it. I've made reference to it, and I've told some people, but I've not really mentioned it publicly. But I stopped working there this past November 2024, after 10 years, pretty much June 2014, right after my daughter was born, until November of 2024. with a little bit of a break in there, but mainly been working there. There's so much to tell and so much to sort of like go into and all of my time there, but I wanted to put together a video that was sort of a tribute to my time there, a tribute to the store, and sort of recounting and talking about all the memories, and particularly records that came from Angry Mom Records that has really expanded my collection. I've upgraded records, I've found rarities, I've discovered music, I've made friends, all that stuff. I mean, a lot went on there. I decided to leave last year, and I wanted to sort of recount some key things that happened, and of course talk about the records. So I made a list of all the interesting things that happened and interesting records I picked up, but I figured the easiest way to do it would just to pick a pile of records, which I have quite a bit here, and tell stories about each one. So this could be a bit of a lengthy video, but I'll try not to make them too long. Angry Mom Records is founded by George Johann, a friend of mine who is still running the store, of course, and met him when I moved here, just like a year after I moved here. In 2010, I was still living in New York and got laid off from my gig at Warner Music Group, and from then until 2013, when I moved to Ithaca, I was running sort of a record store on the side. I was doing dealing, reselling records. And when I moved up here to Ithaca, that's what I was doing for a good little while, and running my own little business, which I continued to do after I met George through Lee, who worked there for many years, and Angry Mom too. I spoke with Lee, and he thought I'd be good fit to work at the store, and George agreed, and we sat down, and he sort of allowed me to still sort of do my, I said, look, I still sell records on the side. I hunt for records. I look for records. And he was cool with that, as long as it wasn't really happening on the store's dime or using the store's resources, which I've always sort of honored and done. Yeah, over the years, I went from working part-time to full-time to part-time again. Then I took a break to go start working at Cornell. And then I came back again, and, I built the website and helped run the shows, and made a newsletter, did all kinds of things. So let's just get into it and start talking about the records, and the memories will come, and all the cool things we did will come as well. If you don't know Angry Mom, it's, like I said, founded by George. It's also a label. He's not really putting out these types of records anymore, but maybe in the future there will be. This is the box set, which you can still get to have and to love and to lose. This is early love songs. A lot of Greek music, 1917 and 1934. Aimé Pedre. And as I said, it's really international music, but there's Ukrainian, there's French music, there's Polish music, and it's really compiled by this guy, Christopher King, who's known in the 78 circles. You may know who he is, with artwork by Robert Crumb. I highly encourage people to buy this. Angry Mom still has copies of this. It's a double LP set in a box. I think they're selling it through the Angry Mom website for like $30. It's got a nice booklet with music, and it's all produced by Chris King, and George was his partner in putting these records out. So it's really great old-time international love songs. So that's part of Angry Mom as a label. This is the most famous release. And I got these, once I started working there. This is out of print from Angry Mom, but in print, I think, still with Third Man. Third Man took over the rights on this. And artwork by Robert Crumb. But this is the first pressing on the Angry Mom label. Angry Mom Archives. A Lament for Icarus, 1926 to 28. Alexis Zumbas, this one got all kinds of press. And the first press is on Angry Mom. So, still have that. There's a CD of this too. So, this is great. Again, a great Greek composer. 78's compiled by Chris King. So that's a bit of, where Angry Mom comes from. George being a big 78 guy himself. But, working there, I started getting knee deep into digging through records and getting into collections and discovering music and discovering things I didn't know I was interested in. And this first one is kind of like that. I mean, I was into post-punk, of course, but I remember this being on the wall for like $40. I was like, what is this all about? This is Vivian Goldman on the 99 label. I've talked about the 99 label, and I've done 2 different videos on that label. This one put me down such a serious wormhole of post-punk, of women-led post-punk, which I'm still down. The 99 label. Vivian Goldman's a journalist, sort of post-punk scenester, or punk scenester, who would work with the Flying Lizards and sort of was a writer. There's the original insert. And she made this EP and a little bit of music on the side, like I said, stuff with the Flying Lizards. And this has been reissued and compiled, but this one I remember pulling off the wall just from interest, just from looking, thinking that looked cool, and it was a big influence on me. This probably goes back about right when I started, maybe 2015, a little bit after I started anyway. Big memories of this and getting into all kinds of music like this. This one was one of the the first like more expensive records I bought at Angry Mom. A Wall Piece Chocolate Watch Band, the second album. Nice copy. I remember this sitting on the wall for a long time, for whatever reason. It's an in-demand record, but at the time, people weren't willing to pay whatever it was for, which is way less than it is now. And of course, I was able to get the staff discount, which is nice. On the Tower label, this is a stereo copy. Inner Mystique, their second album, known for like being a very different beast, different players, different musicians in the band. It's got that baby blue cover on it, as well as I'm Not Like Everybody Else, the Kinks song, and these weird instrumentals. But it's a cool album. Not as good as the first Chocolate Watch Band, I say, but cool. Very cool. And I just, this one stands out as me as one of those early ones that I was like willing to pony up for from Angry Mom Records. You know what I'm excited about?
This cone?
This cone. Now, this may be reminiscent to you deep Kraftwerk fans, but if not, I always think of the first two Kraftwerk albums. But
Absolutely.
This is not Kraftwerk. This is
No.
Pylon. Talking about going digging with collections, one of the cool things would go on long road trips or even close road trips with George. We would, take these trips to go check out collections, which was a big love for me, getting to go and dig through random stuff, whether it was a garage, a basement, people's private collections, people, other dealers who were getting out of it, going through garbage literally. And this one really stands out to me. I remember it was about a 2-hour drive, and often we would do this all in one day, of course, and we were just going through a really dank basement, like no lights, barely any lights, just going through what felt like just records piled on top of each other in a basement. I didn't really take pictures of a lot of this stuff. I should have, but I remember finding this one myself, and of course they go, "Hey George, let's get this." And he was like, nice find, man. The Monastic Trio. This is probably about 2017. Found this one. Nice copy. And at the end of the day, when we got back, that would be the cool thing. You'd see everything we pulled out, and you'd be like, hey, I'd like to take that one home. And he gave me a really nice price on this for $30, I remember. That's what it kind of was going for. I mean, it was maybe probably a little more. That was with my discount. But super sweet to get that, to like be there to dig through all the trash and the garbage, whether we were wearing gas masks or not even gas masks, but I don't think we were. We could have or should have. We should have been wearing masks pre-pandemic, but we weren't. And just getting to take home the treasure that you found, even if it wasn't, even if it was for George or for the record store, that's still cool. You still say that you got to do that. And that was many digs like that I can't even remember. Of course, a lot of times you drive on these long road trips and it doesn't lead to anything. And then you have to salvage. What else can we do? What other thrift stores can we find? What other antique malls can we find? This is a little interesting because this record I didn't actually get to take. I meant to take it out of the giant stacks of records that we loaded into his car. But I got distracted, or I had a run that day, and it ended up getting listed on Discogs and selling immediately. So this is not that copy, but I remember going through in Pennsylvania. It was about an hour drive from here. Forgetting his name, but it was a guy who ran a record store out of a trailer, like literally a trailer on the side of the road, rural Pennsylvania. I think he was a gym. There's a lot of gyms though. It had like flames on the side of it or something. And it was a store though. You had everything priced, and weird prices, like really high prices for all the obvious stuff. But then we would grab a pile of things we thought we could resell for the store, and he would give us like dealer prices for those, So something he had priced at $25, he'd give us for like $8 or whatever. I think he just knew he needed to move, and he did need to move these records because he was dying actually, and he would later pass, and we would later absorb everything. But he was terminally sick, I think, even at that point. And I remember this guy sitting there with a inhaler, I think, and oxygen. But he had all this stuff priced, and then he had all this stuff on the bottom of his bins that was all dollar stuff. And we were finding good stuff in the dollar stuff. And I found this one. And, you know, me being a big primitive guitar guy, you know I wanted it. Don Beekoff Celestial Explosion. Private press on, what is it, the keyboard label? Yeah, keyboard. It's actually a small label. There's a few releases on it. But I was super thrilled to find this in his dollar bin. I was like, George, we got to take this. And he was like, yep. And yeah, whatever happened, I forgot to take it out later. Or there was, like I said, who knows? And it got listed. A lot of times there's records everywhere. There's piles of records you're taking home. You know, you maybe lose sight of it. So I had a reissue of this at the time. So I was like, oh, I'll stick with the reissue for now. And then I'm finding a good copy online, but not for the price I could have gotten this for. But whatever. It was fun to go through that. Another one, I think these are from this guy, but another Jim. I think this guy was Jim too. He was like 3 hours away in the Hudson Valley. And I love talking about these collection digs, but he was an old dealer, an old radio guy, I think, and he used to have he had tons of promos and promo CDs, and he had a house in the Hudson Valley. Where was he? And this was turned on to us by Chris from Hudson Valley Records, Hudson Valley Vinyl, before he had the store. I think he had dealt with this guy, and he's like, hey, you should go check him out. Like, he might be able to help you out with some other records, which was cool for Chris to do. And he did. We visited his house, which was full of good stuff. And then he had all of these little sheds. He had like 3 sheds in his backyard, which were full of records. Full. Like jammed. Like little lawn sheds. And I remember being there in the late winter, and we were freezing. Our hands were freezing. We were going through all the stuff and finding amazing things. It's hard to remember. The one that stands out is the Alan Watts. Is this it? Or this is it? This is it. And that's not the Strokes. And I remember George being super stoked to find that. That's a pretty rare piece, the Alan Watts album. But we were there talking with this guy all day and going through records all day, and then we'd have 3 hours to drive to get back. We didn't stay over anywhere. We never did that usually. We tried to make it all back in one day. But I'm pretty sure I got these out of there. There was tons of jazz and free jazz. The ESP, Heliocentric Worlds of Sun Ra Volume 1 and 2 is Volume 2 and Volume 1. These are not crazy expensive, but I was able to get them for really nice prices. Of course, thanks to George and having a nice employee discount. So I remember that, and I remember those long drives quite well. Other cool things that happened in the store, like we would run promotions for new records. Most of the store is a used store, and there was maybe 5% new, but we would try to stay ahead of what was new and, you know, stock the things that were definitely cutting edge. Promoting them Instagram and the newsletter. And I remember when the Caretaker did the Everywhere at the End of Time, is right? And the 6 phases. We were all big on these, or at least a few of us were. Particularly myself and Lee and Adam. Right. And one day we played all 6 phases in a row on a Saturday. Pretty harrowing stuff if you know these records, and some of them are doubles. Yeah, I think this was probably when the last one was released. It had to be 2017 or 18. And all day we played those, and I'll never forget that. And we were promoting it, and just sort of, it was cool to just have a project like that to do all day in the store. I don't know if it sold many records, but it was cool to do. The Caretaker, Everywhere at the End of the Time. And these were all limited, so we were like making sure to get our order in for each one, and we were really excited when each one got announced. So that was a cool thing. Speaking of records that everyone gets turned on to in the store, like it's kind of one of those things where someone plays it and then like everyone's like, what's this? And everyone who works there, the staff, everyone's like, oh, I gotta get a copy of that. That's happened a few times. This is one that comes to mind. Just remember there's the Charles Lloyd, the Warm Waters record that's really cheap that I know Seven got everyone turned on to. This is one that George got into because he loves like weirdo private press music or just weirdo music. And this is a sort of exploitation, sort of Indian classical, or it's kind of like the Shitra Nagi, I think it is, record. But this is Kali Baloo, Cosmic Remembrance. Probably one of these records that's hated by many. I think it's in the Acid Archives, but loved by some, and for some reason it struck a note with all of us. It's got all this really psychedelic, hippy-dippy, sort of like Eastern sounds, but with this woman here, Kali Baloo, doing really sort of love, cosmic. She talks about cosmic remembrance, but just hippy dippy sort of like lyricisms, or not even lyrics. She's sort of doing spoken word. Here she is. It was on the Western Pacific label. Certainly one they were trying to capitalize on. But something about it, I know 2 or 3 of us were like instantly went out and found this, and this was pretty cheap. I don't know if it still is, but I just remember us all sort of going gaga for this record at the same time. And we only had one copy in the store, which George took, of course, so like everyone else had to go find it. That one comes to mind. Another one, this is what we're playing, what we've been playing. I've talked about this because the Companion Labels record, I'll link to my video on the label below, or the reissue label. They did great reissues of super rare private press records specifically. And they're Acid Archives records, but they're not really psychedelic. Some of them are, some of them aren't. This is T.J. Hustler, The Age of Innocence, or Age of Individualism, with his metaphysical synthesized orchestra. And T.J. Hustler is made by Tim Jones. That's who T.J. is. And T.J. Hustler is his ventriloquist dummy. So on this song, you're hearing the ventriloquist dummy's beat, essentially, his rap. And Tim Jones is the guy who's made this music. It's all this minimal synth, sort of funk, sort of soul. And he's like rapping on this record. Not even rapping, but he's doing like sort of like early beat, sort of like hip hop vocal, just like talking about all kinds of gibberish. But it's such a fun record, and we all got so interested in this one just because of the sake of it, just how weird it was and how long everything is. All these super long tracks with these simple, minimal funk grooves with the drum machine. It's from 1979. Like 20 people have this original. It's like a $2,000 record if you find it. So there's probably, I don't know how many he made, only a few hundred. But this companion reissue, which I remember costing like $30, maybe even $35 in the store. We sold a bunch of these, but you can get this for like $15 to $20 right now. I highly recommend getting this if you're liking what you've been listening to. But this was one of those ones that everyone in the store was into. We all love this. So I think about this record for sure when I think about Angry Mom. Acetone, a band I knew growing up, but I'm going to leave it in the jacket, but didn't fully check them out. This one became a big one for myself and Adam, who worked there. We both got into this, talking about this, and like really going after their other records and really just obsessing about how good this was. And this is the compilation of unreleased music and some released music by Light in the Attic. Just beautiful, minimal slowcore, I guess. Yeah, it's indie slowcore is what it is, but just amazing vocals, amazing harmony, and gorgeous songs. They did have some like straight up rock songs in their early records, but they would be signed to Neil Young's Vapor label, but then they kind of flamed out after their singer committed suicide, Richie Lee, in 2001. So this is 92 to 2001. Acetone, and this was a big one that we talked about and sort of like, sent both of us down a wormhole, and you remember those wormholes. I still love this so much. Acetone, 92 to 2001 on Light in the Attic. Lots of interesting or well-known musicians, famous people came in the store. I remember Bob Pollard coming in when Guided by Voices played. He had a whole stack of records, and you'd think it seemed like he would do that in every town. I remember him buying like a lot of stuff I wouldn't have thought he would be interested in. I know he bought like a Tim Buckley record, I remember. But just cool that he was there, and it was just fun to have Bob Pollard in your store digging through his records. In 2000, again, the years are foggy. It's somewhere in the 2016 to 18 range. There was a punk exhibit that happened at Cornell, and it featured all original memorabilia, posters, records. Some were provided by George on loan, and they brought in, like, X was there, Zine Cervenka, and what's his name? I just forgot his name. Other notable people, journalists, and most important and interesting to us, Ian Mackay and Henry Rollins, who were around town for a day or a few days. A friend of mine even got a picture with them when they were walking around the Cornell campus. So I'm just showing the Ithacan 7-inch because Ian Mackay came in the store when we were working. He came in twice. It was another time he came in. I forget why he was there a second time. But he came in while we were working there, and we were all just like... And, you know, we didn't make a big deal of it, but we were all pretty stoked that he was there. And, you know, didn't hassle him or anything. I didn't get his autograph, anything like that. I don't really usually do that, but... I remember him flipping through our new arrivals, like really pulling all the records up really high, like very intentionally. And I remember him looking for dancehall records, and he bought a Yellow Man album or something like that. He did buy something. I feel like George just gave it to him. No, he paid it. He did pay for it. Yeah, so like that was obviously one of the most important people to come into our store, especially when you talk about everyone across the board who worked there. I was like pretty excited that Ian Mackay came in. Angry Mom is where I got into Ween, and I have 3 Ween records. This is the pod, the one I love the most. WFMU was doing a week-long special. Every day they would play a different Ween song, and they played the song Pork Roll, Egg, and Cheese. And I got so interested in it. Of course, I've always known about Ween, but I always sort of like dismissed them. This is the original pressing on Shimmy Disc. Adam, who works there, is a huge Ween person, like big. And so he was like schooling me on what Ween records to get and what I should... you know, stuff I should pay attention to, and give me a little taste of their whole backstory. And
I'll bring in my copy of the pod, and you should borrow it because it's a trip.
Dean and Jean Ween, this is their second album, and the one I really still like the most. I'd say I have originals of this one, and Pure Guava, and Chocolate and Cheese. Those are the 3 I have. But Pork Roll, Egg, and Cheese, the second to last song I remember, I really associate with Angry Mom, even though it was WFMU that played it, but getting to talk through those records with Adam, and he was very excited, I think, that somebody would so late in the game to be able to get into Ween's music, you know, the pod. Obviously this is a Leonard Cohen reference to that Greatest Hits album. Put them on the heavily hitting the dope, you know, they did that. Yeah, I think about this record too when I think about Angry Mom, actually.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. I mean, I'm not gonna try to maintain shrink.
You're a bit in a post-shrink world.
Well, I'm starting to go in that direction.
Yeah, you're liberated.
I mean, in a sense, made in Germany.
Yeah,
That's good.
that's why mine's taking 2 weeks longer.
It's coming direct from Germany, you know.
Yeah.
You're gonna have some special
9
sort of. All right.
Yeah, open it.
I'm gonna keep that. You would just be like this. But
I may stick it in the box, but I'm not gonna worry about like George would rewrap it every time.
I know, it's amazing.
Ooh.
I think about Angry Mom when it comes to the pandemic and thinking about, wow, 5 years ago we were all dealing with that. And I have photos of the last day before the close. I worked the store. I don't remember who else worked, but maybe just me. I remember like no one was around, and I have pictures from like when the town was starting to empty out and everyone was starting to close in. But it was March 13th, and it was literally the day before the world shut down, which in my mind happened on Saturday, March 14th, 2020. And I remember, I don't know why, I was like, let's go back to the basics, and you'll see a picture of all the Rolling Stones records I pulled out. But I played this. My friend Joe was in the store. You can see a picture of just him in the store looking through the records with no one else around. Not many people came in. I think we didn't even work the whole day, and then we shut down for however long it was until we had to figure out how to sell records to people again. But I think about this record, and I think about the pandemic and how it didn't kill the store. The store made it. George kept the ship afloat. Think about that. Obviously, a lot of amazing collections came into the store. One of the greatest jazz collections I've ever seen came through maybe 4 years ago, 2021. And it was all on consignment. so we sold it for this guy, but we got to go through and get good prices, fair prices, not our normal discount on a bunch of records. And I did a whole video about it. I think I took home like 12 records. I brought in a bunch of stuff to trade. I'll show you a couple. Original Clifford Jordan in the World with Don Cherry, and you all know this one. It's on Strata East. Julian Priester, Don Cherry, Wynton Kelly, Wilbur Ware, Richard Davis, Albert Tootie Heath. Nice copy. Everything was in great shape on the Strata East label. Yeah, it was all mainly jazz, so everything I brought home that day was jazz. And the other one I think about from that collection, amazing record collection, about an hour away. This guy was an ex-dealer. No, sorry, ex-music industry, and he was in the live music business, I think. So he used to help with tours, but everything was promos, so he was in the industry. This is not the very first pressing, but it's pretty early. Pharoah Sanders Quintet on ESP, Stan Forster, Jane Getz, William Bennett, Martin Patillo, 1965. It's got these labels. Maybe if I think of it, I'll link to that video where I talked about all those records more in depth that I brought home from that collection. Over the years, I've gotten great birthday gifts. George gave me my first original of Maggot Brain. This is a pretty respectable copy too. It's really, as you all know, really hard to find nice copies of this. This is like a nice VG. Nothing's really super worn. The spine is impossible to find with this nice clean spine. And the record's a VG Plus, actually. Yeah, the record's pretty nice, so this is a gift. What a cool thing. Or it could have even been a Christmas one. I think it was a straight up gift for my birthday. Because at the end of the year, George was really cool about giving out a little cash bonus, too. Maggot Brain, what a great gift. But the most important gift to me, I remember everyone in the store chipping in. And I know it had a lot to do with my dad passing away. I talked about that in 2018. Right after that, it happened right around my birthday. So when my birthday happened, everyone chipped in when a nice copy of this came into the store. And they all chipped in. And this wasn't just, George just giving this to me. He said, hey, I can't just give this one away. If everyone chips in X amount, we can give this as a gift. And they gave me my copy of Radio City. Big Star. Promotional, but not a promo label. Until that time, I didn't have any of the originals. At this point, I have the first album, original pressing. I don't have the third yet, but maybe one day on that. I have the box set of that. How cool that was! And it was such a special gift to give me after my dad passed. So, and what a nice copy too. So that was amazing. It was one of those things that I was like, I couldn't believe, that everybody had done that. So that was amazing. At the end of 2022, the Angry Mom basement moved upstairs, as many of you may know. If you visited the store prior to the beginning of 2023 or end of 2022, we would have been in the basement, which is sort of my fondest memories, honestly, of being there. But one thing that we did, and there were bands that would play in the store in the basement, but it was just always so tight. Some pretty notable people played there, like what's his name, Alex G played there in his young days. One of my early bands played there. Lots of bands played there. I have pictures of that. My buddies Chimes and Bayonets played there. A lot of records, mostly record store day events, but we would do in stores too, regular shows. But when we moved upstairs, there was a lot more space, and one of the things that we committed to and have done in almost 3 years now is have a ton of shows. There've been shows after shows after shows, and at least once a week now. I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 times a month. There's tons of shows, and we've been able to get some actual big acts to come. And props to Adam, who was able to get in touch with Patrick Flegel, aka Cindy Lee, which is what we're playing right now. Her last album, or their last album, or the band's last album, What's Tonight to Eternity. Diamond Jubilee is definitely the masterpiece, but this is good too. On the West 25th Superior Viaduct label, but Adam was able to get Cindy Lee, which is basically Patrick Flegel and Freak Waves was it? Who was like the backing band and opened up. But it's primarily Cindy Lee singing and performing, playing guitar, and it was a mesmerizing show. And I know it was a stressful one because we had to pony up a pretty good guarantee to get Cindy Lee, and we got Cindy Lee to perform at Angry Mom before all the hype around her latest record, or the latest record. cool to get a band that we love so much, or an act we love so much, even as it was just, you know, still pretty under the radar, but gaining a lot of notoriety. And then once Diamond Jubilee got released on YouTube, obviously that all changed. But this was all done in the summer of 2023 was when that show happened. So I think about that as one of my favorite shows, but more to come on that. The years that Angry Mom is doing a lot of A-Being, and I know that's big in the VC. Jason Rojas has done some really great versions of that with the way his setup is. That's the way to do it. He's doing a great job with those, having both turntables going at the same time, playing the same exact piece, one slightly behind the other, and doing quick rotations between each. Well, Angry Mom, we would do that in the store, and we were doing that between those early 2015, 16, 17, 18, all in there. There was even briefly a radio show which followed my radio show, but it was all Angry Mom staff getting together and having a show. It was called Basement Dwellers. You can listen to those, and I'm on most of them. I'll link to that as a Mixcloud link with all of those. That's still up. That show is no longer out there. It's defunct, but there was maybe 20 of those. But we did a lot of famous records. We would all bring in the copies we had, compare them to maybe it was a new reissue, or maybe just stuff we wanted to compare. So I know, like, we did a lot of big stuff, like the Velvet Underground or Nico. Here's my original stereo. I don't have the earliest press. It's a banana. It's a West Coast airbrushed, but it's a beautiful intact banana. Really nice vinyl on this. So we did this with a mono, and that's the thing. We wouldn't just compare the different pressings. Whether we were really focusing on how different the mixes were, not necessarily like an audiophile thing, like, oh, how good is how good are Kevin Gray's knob twiddling on this, but we were really comparing the mixes too, but coming from a mastering perspective too, like how different was the UK from the US, or the later US reissue from the original issue, or like the 80s pressing from the 60s, whatever. But so there's pictures of this. There's pictures of all of us just looking at the front of the store and looking and listening. And it's funny because we would do this like while the store was open, but we would usually pick a day, like a weekday towards the end of the day when it was going to be quiet. So we did this. We did the Zombies. We did the Kaleidoscope Tangerine Dream, which George had an original of that, a monocopy, and we all had a few reissues of that. We did this Red Crayola, my original and my reissue of this. I still have a double reissue of this, which this has the mono and the stereo on it, and I have a, what do I have? Stereo original on International Artist, one of my favorite psych records. We did like all of the Brian Eno records, the first four. No, yeah. How many did we do? We did a bunch when they did those Abbey Road remasters, which I've sold all of since. We did all those. Here's my original pink rim, Taking Tiger Mountain by Strategy. I have all the first UKs on these early Enos. Most of the early Enos I have first UKs. So we did that, and there was some really interesting and cool details that we would find when we would do this. We all got so into it, or most of us did, I think. Yeah, it was a seriously nerdy thing, and we would post those stuff on Instagram. So that if you look back on our Instagram feed, you can see us results of that, and we would put that out there. We were doing that a long time ago. There's even a few times where I sold originals and kept reissues because the reissues were so much better. Now, these weren't for things like Fleetwood Mac or something like that. It was usually for things that were cleaning up an original. Like this, I had an original of this, which I actually sold to George. Sun City Girls, Torch of the Mystics. This reissue just crushed it to me. And now the original, and this is a sanctioned band. This is not like Chris Bellman's doing this. This is the band reissuing this, so it's not as if they're like, someone's taking liberties with the sound. They cleaned this up, and well, not even cleaned it up, but they just made it sound bigger and better. The original that I had, I sold to George. And this is this is obviously their most accessible record, but it's not that accessible, but it's a great guitar album. Really unhinged and frayed and scrappy. So I kept the reissue and sold the original. And another one, I was gonna buy an original, but I didn't. I kept my reissue of High Rise, which is on the Black Editions label, who's done all the PSF, or a lot of the PSF Japanese records out of Japan. This is Psychedelic Speed Freaks. That's the name of the label, PSF, but that's what this music is. Fast psychedelic rock, essentially. And this reissue on Black Editions is amazing. This is High Rise 2. I think you can still get this. So the A-Being was a big thing for at least a year or two that we did. And then periodically we would bring it back. I put together a bunch of shows myself, because each of us had the had the ability to be a producer effectively for shows at the store. And one of the coolest ones was Chandra, 1980s, early 80s post-punk singer and band fronter who at the age of, what was she, 14? Fronted this band. And she has been active making music again and touring again over the last X amount of years. And getting to work with her and set up the show and do a radio show with her, I'll link to that. I did a whole hour radio show with her. And then my band didn't play that show. My band, Material Objects, played a bunch of other shows, of course, which I'll talk about in a second. But Chandra walked into the store one day. Now, her daughter, right, they were visiting Ithaca College, and she came to visit Chandra and saw, weirdly, the only time we've had the record on the wall, she happened to walk in while we had it on the wall, and that's this copy, which I would later buy that week. And I'd missed when she was in there. But I'll show you the picture of her holding this copy before it got signed in the store in Angry Mom Records. Her turning in. St. Mark's Sounds, by the way. You've seen these stickers. That's the St. Mark's record shop. St. Mark's Sounds on St. Mark's. That went out of business like 15, 20 years ago, but those stickers are notorious. Anyway, fast forward a year or so later, this was one of the last things I did before I decided to leave. She wanted to come do a show. She remembered this. She liked Ithaca. And she wanted to come do a show. They were playing a few shows in Canada. Now her whole band is Canadian, and this band is great. So they were doing a few shows in Canada, and they wanted to come to Ithaca, which was hard for them to do because they had a hard time. This was pre-Trump. They had a hard time getting into this country with all their instruments and everything, and all Canadians, mainly French Canadians. She did the show, and she was so gracious, and she did the radio show with me before the show of that day, and then we took all pictures with her and my family. Here's the original. It's an EP, and this is punk, like a no-wave post-punk, and she's like doing this sort of snotty, brash thing she was the daughter of Daniel Oppenheim, the artist and sculptor. Here's the poster we made, or her label made. She has her own label, and we were stocking some of those releases that does some new music. So here it is, yeah, Friday, November 22nd. So what a highlight getting to set the show up with her, put on the show, do the radio show, and it was an amazing show. Her band was so good. So she signed that. And I kept the reissue. There's a few different reissues of this, which are all kind of out of print at this point. But the first reissue is on Cantor, so she signed my reissue. And I've kept this because it has bonus material that she recorded with... she recorded after that EP. That self-titled EP, or it's really called the Transportation EP, that came out in 1980, and she didn't follow it up then. She went back to school, essentially. But she made some music that got recorded, and it's included here. But this Cantor reissue has this booklet, and then there's a newer reissue on her label, which is maybe gone now. She had a few copies that was left at the show. So this was like a lifetime highlight to work with her, and she was so nice. Such a cool person. She's, almost 60 now, and she was 14 then, I think. Here's my notes from when I did the radio show talking about her. So that was the last thing I did essentially at the store, and I decided to leave that last November. And what a great way to go out on. But still things were going on there. My band, Material Objects, released our record in June, and before our record came out, sorry, I know this video is long, we were asked by George to open up for MSSV, Mainstream Steam Valve. With Mike Watt, Stephen Hedges, and Mike Baggetta. Sorry, Stephen Hodges, Mike Baggetta, Mike Watt. Mike Baggetta is an intimidating guitar player in his approach and how good he is, but he's intense. And Stephen Hodges is just a pro and a professional. And Mike Watt, what a sweetheart. He talked with us. He said nice things about us. He even wrote about us in his blog that he does every day. I'll link to that entry. But we played and opened up for MSSV. We kept it to 25, 30 minutes tops, which we were like we were like not messing around. We made sure to start when we were supposed to start and end when we were supposed to end. We had our sound check done in time. Like Mike Watt can barely walk. We wanted to make sure everything was cool with him. So I bought the latest record. I have 2 mssv records. What a highlight getting to play with them. Like we played with a lot of, in front of a lot of people too, so that was sweet. That was this last April. It's just so many good memories of bands being in the store and playing at the store, and how cool to get to play with some of them. And that was this past April, and I have this here too. I haven't shown this record yet. This is one of the last, I went on a big dig there in May, I think, and I pulled this off the wall, live in Ankara, Don Cherry. I haven't even talked about this one. I'll put this in a vinyl absorption, but I was really looking for this. This is an original Sonic pressing. Some really good jazz has been coming in there lately. But I decided to leave in November. It was starting to feel like it was time to go. As I said, in 2021, and up until then, I was working part-time for a little while, full-time, then part-time again, and then I had an opportunity to work at Cornell at the Architecture and City Planning School in IT, and I took that, but I was able to keep working in Angry Mom in the afternoons for a while. I ended up working 3 days, a few hours a week. Then I decided to leave, but kept doing the newsletter, and I always did the newsletter. I kept doing the newsletter and started putting on these shows, and then my very final last year, basically fall of 2023 to 2024 fall, I was then back working in the store. You can see me all over the Instagram doing the different videos, and so I went back to work for 2 days a week for a very small amount of time, but just to be in the store again. And I was really helping at that time with a giant toy collection we were dealing with, which was another fun memory of traveling down to Long Island with Noah, who worked in the store, and on 2 trips bringing back a truckload full of these valuable toys from somebody that passed away that George was acquainted with, that helped bring in a lot of money for the store. That's the other thing about Angry Mom. George has never been hesitant to sell other types of things, because he just looks at it like this is just more funds to buy great collections with. So that was a lot of great memories there, and at that time I just decided it was too much trying to keep my job, which became full-time at Cornell, and running and doing some record sort of time. So it just felt like it was time to put a close on that and continue to be a customer when I can. But yeah, there's so many great memories. I went through the entire Instagram feed of Angry Mom, all the way back to the very first post, and there's all kinds of stuff of me up there. Lots of different videos of me talking about records, and we used to do a Friday wrap-up of new releases with Adam, and where we riffed a lot, and there's lots of things of me flipping through the bins. If you really care and you want to see kind of what I've been doing there, you can check those out. 10 years of my life working for that record store, and I don't regret any of it. It was a great place to be. I thank George, the whole staff, everybody there. It's not only grown my collection, but it's just gave me a lot of great memories. Going through these photos has been amazing, just to see all this stuff, and brought back a lot of good chuckles, a lot of stuff. Probably, a lot of things happen behind the scenes I wouldn't even bring up on camera, but it was all part of the thing. So anyways, it's been a long video. I hope you enjoyed all the different video and memories. And, I don't do a lot of videos where I talk a lot about personal history or personal memories, so I really wanted to do this and put a good bow on my time at Angry Mom. So we'll see where I go from here in terms of that. But there's so many other things I'm sure I'm forgetting, but that's okay. I gave you a lot. So that's it. Check out Angry Mom Records, Angry-Mom-Records web. Discogs is an entirely different inventory that's not in the store on the Discogs app, on the Discogs store. So if you're in Ithaca, come by. Oh. And if you're in Ithaca, you should come August 20th. This is somewhat related, but not. George will be at this. This is a vinyl swapping shop that I'm putting on at a bar downtown Ithaca, down here in Ithaca, called The Downstairs. August 20th, 7 p.m. If you're interested in coming to this, come. Stop at Angry Mom and come for this. This is at a bar where we can hang out and have drinks. But it's going to be basically a mini record fair where you can bring records to trade, you can bring records that you want to sell, or just hang out, and there's going to be a turntable, records are being spun, bar, the whole thing. It'll be a place to commune and talk records, but
have it be about a bit of a sale and swap and sale. So there'll be like a few people dealing, essentially, people with like a box of records. So there's like at least 5 to 10 people, maybe more, who have like a fair amount of stuff to look through. And then anyone else who shows up, you could bring 1 or 2 things, maybe to hopefully trade with someone. But hopefully there'll be like a base level of people with records to sell. I will be one of those. So if you're interested in coming, let me know, or just come. If you're close to Ithaca, it's a good reason to come here on a Wednesday. The summer here is amazing. And you can stop in Angry Mom, which is literally steps away from where this is going to be. So, all right, hope you enjoyed all that and all those memories. Walk down memory lane with me. I am Dom, Seeking a Thread. I'll talk with you soon.
When you've had your fun and your work is done, you must not succumb. I can feel you breathe. It's like a mega wish inside. Please don't hide. So mama, if you please, pass me the pork roll, egg and cheese. If you please, all the Kaiser bun. Mama, if you please, pass me the pork roll, egg and cheese. If you please, all the Kaiser bun. When the guava's drained, editing the remains, but we must further ourselves on. So dynamic is life, staring into the sun.